without being chemically held together. It's held together by the electric bonds of water. The clay itself is not a particular mineral; it's a particle size, and it's a size that's close enough matched in to a molecule of water that when the water disappears, the particles of clay are still stuck to each other. That's the magic of clay, and unlike concrete or Portland cement, which requires a chemical reaction that's enormously environmentally destructive in order to create it, you have to use a lot of heat to make the chemical reaction that then is unmade when you mix it with water so that it all becomes one solid piece. That chemical reaction is environmentally very expensive, whereas this one is a matter of it gets wet. So in order to build with this and have it be a thing that lasts a long time, you'll want to get it up. We call it good boots and a good hat. You build your foundation up about yay high off the ground so that the running water from a rainstorm doesn't get it, and then you put a wide eave around it, or even like a wraparound porch. So a good hat and good boots means this stuff will last almost indefinitely, and easily repairable. We had a friend with a straw bale house covered with this stuff. Friend backs into the side of the house with their car. They just weren't paying attention, backed right into it. And they get out and they're, oh no, I gotta call my insurance company. Oh, I'll make it right. And she just got a dustpan and swept it up and mixed it with a little water and took a trowel and put it back on the wall, while the guy with the car is like, whoa. I was sure I'd just watched my weekly paycheck go away. You know, it was.
So do the walls shrink a little bit when it dries?
They shrink a little bit, yeah. And so when you're building something out of cob, say, you're sculpting a big clay pot to live in, and it's shrinking a little bit as you're building it up, and then you just got to tuck a little bit into the last spot to fill it in, or you can, or it'll shrink maybe a little bit. But the idea of the aggregate is to have it be kind of a lattice work so that it doesn't shrink.
Oh.
There's almost no shrinkage when you've got the proper amount of sand or fiber in there. So I'll show you here. I stopped in Huntsville, Alabama, and I went over to, I even made a little video of it. I went over to where somebody was drilling a post hole, and I ignored the topsoil. The topsoil has wigglies in it, and the nutrient and the decaying stuff, the organics that make us live by letting things grow. But those also will tend to change size really easily.
Because of the decomposition.
Right, decomposition. So I wanted to dig down below that and get the, and somebody else did the digging for me. They just had dug a post hole and left the stuff in a pile. So I got the clay bits and brought it with me and soaked it overnight last night. So I could use a mixer. I could just throw this in with some water and let a mixer just beat this up and turn it into creamy stuff.
You did that? You used a mixer?
No, I didn't. I just put some water in it.
Okay.
And then it's already. But like the stuff I used up in Ohio, I did a pizza oven the other day. It was a clay that had been under pressure for so long because it had been underground that it was turning into like rock. So we had to just take a big mixer and beat on it after it had sat for months and it was still not quite creamy, it was still chunky. When we do this in Jamaica, the clay there feels like gravel, but it's not gravel, it's clay. It needs to just sit and soak for long enough to use it.
To break up the chemical bonds?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, because it's partway on its way to becoming rock again. There's a cycle it goes through. But if I get it when it's still fairly easy to disincorporate, I can get the water in it and mix it really easily with fiber so that it's sculpty. One of the things I like about it, about this, is that I can actually make a house that's that's sculpted to my needs rather than being just there's a module, the module of 4 by 8
it for me for a
foot.
second?
Why do we do a 4 by 8 module?
The lumber comes in.
Mr. Capable Carpenter. Yeah, everything is 8 foot-ish. And it's not because there's very many people that need an 8-foot ceiling, it's just that's what size it comes in. And and then if you had to drywall a curved wall, would that
Can
be
you
more or
babysit
less
this for me?
expensive than a flat wall?
That would suck.
Yeah, it would suck expensive and for you, even if you charged a lot of money for it. Because these materials come in flat things. So our buildings tend to be rectilinear, even though human beings are organisms, and there is nothing rectilinear about us. There is nothing that fits. So my friend Yanto refers to a sculpted house as one that is so many round feet instead of square feet, because the module on which a human being exists is it comfortable when I'm sitting? Is it comfortable when I'm laying down? Is it comfortable when I'm standing up? Where is everything? Is it just outside of my space, or my space, or my space? Or is it square? The corners are useless, except that our furniture is now all designed around houses with corners. So if I want a place to sit and talk to somebody, I have to get a couch. So it has to have this space here, but I can't really like talk to them on the couch like this, so I have to get another couch. There's got to be a space to walk through, but it's annoying when people are walking through between your conversation, so you make the room big enough that they can walk around the back of it to create the eddy in the stream that we like to have when we're trying to have a conversation and just be in a spot. We don't like to be right in the middle of the traffic flow. We want to be to the edge, okay? So we've created this edge, but now this edge has to have a bigger and bigger room associated with it to fit our couch and our chair or our other couch in order for us to have a simple conversation that could have been sculpted. And if you sculpted a little couch into the wall that was round, then you can have this conversation at a really nice human level. So sculpting things instead of just buying the module of 2 foot by 8 foot or 4 foot by 8 foot gives us a more human experience, a more organic experience in our in the buildings we live in. I don't know if anybody else has had this where you just felt dehumanized by sitting in a room all day where there's cubicles and it's a cube that you're stuck in, and you look up at the ceiling, and even the ceiling is 4 by 2 or whatever it is from those pieces of stuff they drop the ceiling with. Instead, I can use whatever I come up with. What happens when you need a new window for a house that has beautiful siding on it, and you can't get that right and that right size? That size of window is not a standard size.
You gotta get a window made.
You got to get a window made, which is expensive, right?
Yep.
Or you have to figure out how you're going to cut a hole without damaging the sides to fit the window you have, right? Now, if I am sculpting my house according to whatever materials I have and whatever window I happen to have, I can use the window that I got for $5 or found in the dumpster. So there's a game that goes with this. Normally, a house costs, to have a house built for you, is between $150 and $300 a square foot, depending on how custom it is, how fancy the bits you want are, and of course where you are. But some friends of mine decided that rather than play the game according to what the realtors wanted and what the bankers wanted, that they would have their own game that they would make, which was, can I build a house for the money I have? And this conversation went like this. So Yanto and Michael were having this conversation, and Michael, being more of a mechanical engineering sort, says, well, what's our budget? And Yanto said, I don't know, $5,000? And Michael said, where did that number come from? I just thought that sounded like a good number for a house. Do we even have $5,000? No. Well, then why did you bring it up? It just sounded like a good number. How much do we have? We have 500. Okay, so they got a coffee can, and they stuck the money in the coffee can, and they started building a house. And every time they needed something, they looked at the money in the coffee can, Now, when it's time to get a door, you can go to Home Depot, and maybe it's $20 in gas, right? And then it's your afternoon to drive into wherever Home Depot is, but you can get a pre-made door that's framed nicely and just it's in, right? But it's what, $350 give or take. So there's most of your $500. Game is almost over and you've just got a door. Or you mention to somebody, everybody, you tell everybody, I'm looking for a door. And somebody says there was one in that dumpster, and they help you get it. Or you keep watching and you find one in the dumpster, or you find one at the Restore for $20, or you find one on Craigslist or whatever. But the point is that instead of $350 of your $500 being gone just for the door, you had to do a little more work, but now you got a free door. Game's still on. You start looking around and you go out in God's hardware store and there's your door handle. Game's still on. And you see how much of your game you can do with the $500. No credit card, no paying it off over 30 years. Mortgage. Anybody know what the word mortgage comes from? It's an old French word for death pledge.
Death, yeah.
Death pledge. Mortgage is a death pledge. I agree that my heirs, after I die, because people didn't live 30 years at that point, after I die, my heirs will continue to pay on this thing that I agreed to and lived in comfortably, long after it's any use. So my double wide didn't make it past the mortgage without having to be totally rebuilt several times. But I'm having lots of fun rebuilding it with sculpty things like clay. Look at that cool little vase they made. Questions? Bring up any questions for anybody?
Does it matter does compactness matter? Like I'm smacking it to like compact it, but I'm feeling like that's irrelevant. Or is it
Does it make you feel good?
It does.
Okay, well then go for it. It's mostly
Some
irrelevant.
frustrations there.
Yes, this is great
I'm
therapy.
beating it.
In all seriousness, I have a friend who's a Quaker who is a therapist who works with veterans when they come back, and they'll have somebody who's really on the brink, and they'll come out and they say, well, I don't have time to see you, but if you want to come out and talk while I'm working on my house, you can come. And he's been working on a house for 25 years because this is his shtick, is they come out and they start working with this. And 3 days in to doing this, there's this thing that happens where your brain turns off because your hands are busy. And you just keep working your hands and your brain lowers its guard. And eventually somebody might say, why did Jack not come home and I did? Or why did I have to kill that kid? Or. Something starts to come out, and there's a healing that starts with it. There's this tactile thing that's quite delicious.
Is it also, I saw you doing this, is it also a left and right? Or like
there are
walking is a
so
left
many
and
things
right?
that our bodies don't get to do.
Right. Like EMDR is like a left-right alternation, and that, I don't know what that does, but I know
we just got to get out of our brains sometimes.
Yeah.
We're trapped in our own brains so very often. We had we were teaching at a festival in California, and the autistic kid who built the sound system out of junk, we coaxed him into our mud pit, and he stood there for 45 minutes rocking back and forth, one foot to the other, barefoot in this mud pit, screaming, oh my god, oh my god. And we asked his mom, she's standing there crying. I said, is this okay? Is this a problem? She says, he's being introduced to his feet. He lives here and here. This is where he lives, up here. He doesn't have any use for his feet except that they irritate him when he has to put on socks because they're a different texture. This is good, getting you back into your body. So when you can get back into your body and you can do something that doesn't necessarily require expertise. There's so many things in the world that used to be part of being a human being, being able to know where food came from and water came from and energy and shelter, and participate on a real level in those things. And those things are slowly removed as we become more and more expert at less and less. And then we have to hire somebody to do the other things because we're no longer capable of doing the things that, just everybody had to do at one point in history.
That's my point of reference when I think about things. That's my point of reference. It's like we weren't made to do this. We used to do this.
Yes, yes.
I think that gives you a certain type of wisdom. We work off that.
Well, in some cultures that are indigenous and still functional, the sign of being an adult is that you know where food and water and energy and shelter come from, and that you can interact with those things as they need to be interacted with for everybody to eat, and you start seeing things in a different way than I'm hungry. It's okay. What happens next so that people won't be hungry when it's not just time to pick the berries off of the bush? What happens next so that we won't be cold? What happens next so that we'll have light?
Preparation.
Right. And how do we do these things in a way that doesn't take the environment to the point it can't produce anymore?
And back in my day, and even elementary and middle school, we took field trips, like to a dairy and to where they make bread, and all these different places, so we knew where things came from.
Right, right.
And kids don't do that anymore.
And your grandmother would have known how to do this by the time she was this age, because she would have helped make the bread all the time. And sometimes it still exists. Some places it still exists, but most of the time we all go do our specialty and then have to buy the stuff from the other person.
Right. Bartering system is alive and well.
Yeah, yeah, but it means that we're not necessarily as alive or as well as we used to be. I mean, we live longer, but are we as alive or well as we used to be?
So I noticed that you separated the bigger stuff.
Oh, I was just
Right.
playing with that. Let me show you the difference here. So this is very sculpty, okay? You were feeling that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now this is actually more structural, okay? The longer the fibers are, the more that one fiber, the one lump mushed into cob is an Old English word for lump. So you'd have a lump that you mush into another lump until you have a lump big enough to live in. And
Does it go against your principles, like if you're doing a big house, to mix it, sort of start mixing in a big bowl or something, or is
oh my
does
goodness,
everything
I'll
only
use a
have to be
skid loader.
handfuls?
I'll use a tractor. I'll use a skid loader. Whatever
Okay.
I can.
I was going, it would take forever just to do one little handful at
Yes,
a time.
it does. Okay, so here's two pieces. Here. This is longer fiber,
Right.
okay, and this is shorter fiber.
Right.
Okay, structurally, the one that's longer fiber is a lot stronger.
Sure.
There was an example. One of my friends got an opportunity to build a little kiosk at a park in Vancouver, Canada, but they were required to get seismic testing on this cob building because the code officials didn't believe that it would stand up to potential earthquakes and stuff in the area. So they so they tested this building that by the time it dries it's monolithic. It's one big chunk, and it's chunks that are connected together with fibers, and they put it on a shake test table at a university to test it, to try to simulate a 0.8 Richter scale earthquake, and they broke the table. They broke the earthquake table because the thing itself absorbed all of the wall itself absorbed all of this all of the energy, and before breaking up.
I think he was aiming for the tree, though. Could be wrong.
Yeah, this stuff gets pretty hard to get out of clothes sometimes. So we want to.
So when you're
Makes a good
actually
clay
like
mat.
an actual
Well,
saw
thank
mat,
goodness they're replacing the tent.
is it like I know
Because now
like the
it's
mud
stained.
daubers they do like
Ah.
bricks of it.
We can all
And
have
then that's
mud
gonna
masks
foundation,
this afternoon.
Right. Actually, no. They'll use stone for the foundation
Wait,
because they want to get up where it's
Like
not
long
going to get
so
wet
this is structural.
Okay, so what
before they
kind of
start
stone?
with this.
Thing?
I think you're just saying it's
So my favorite is
well, this is more
urbanite. It's
sculpture.
busted chunks of
Like,
concrete because it's free.
malleable, I
They
guess.
just got to find a place to pick it up and haul it around.
Oh, so I noticed
Say
your
that last
socks.
bit again?
Is that-
Urbanite.
did you do that for a
Urbanite.
reason?
Urbanite.
Was
Oh,
the-
because it
was
gets
the-
sliding
It's
down.
a
Oh, okay.
catchy
So
name
had to do
for
with
busted
the
chunks
taste.
of
I'm just looking
concrete.
at the taste.
So,
No, I
okay.
did get a tick
And
earlier.
Oh,
but I
yeah?
See those
got it
piled
off
up
before.
everywhere that you see
Do you
construction construction jobs
it's
where they're
from
just
walking in
getting
the
rid of
bush,
Yeah.
or do they fall from the trees?
Well, they turned
They
a lot
kinda-
of like at
They're
where they
everywhere,
make
they're everywhere.
concrete.
Yeah,
they
they're
turned into those big
opportunists.
blocks.
They're
Uh-huh.
like,
They would all have
even if
leftover
they're on the
stuff.
leaf, when
Yep.
you brush by a leaf, well then.
Huh.
Company my dad works for.
I'll check myself tomorrow.
Yeah, you just gotta
Yep.
check everywhere.
Yep.
All the like
I
little
have
Now was
some
that the same? The
crevices,
first
too,
thing
like
that you
back
said
of your
that was
knees or, like,
where
hip
it was like the
crevices.
premix.
I have some.
That was
Bugs
that was
spray.
I call it premix, but it's a mixture of sandy clay. It's compactable
Everything.
fill
Okay.
And you're getting that
And with those
from
from
You
a
can't see
a gravel
Like
quarry
back
that
here
washes the
somewhere.
gravel,
Then it
like
sits there for days.
the rounded.
You don't want to get Lyme
Stone.
disease.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what goes first?
You want one of these?
No,
I'm
I'm keeping them clean just
The
because
first
I've been
thing is
icing
you'll
mine.
make
Okay,
you'll,
hold on to
you
this
can
one.
make
You remember
actually
they have
a
to-
foundation
You need to
out
get
of
a bucket of some
out of
the
chunks
non-drinkable
of
water
like
so
broken
people can wash
concrete,
their
broken
hands,
brick,
'cause
whatever.
they
It's
were
called
gonna take
a
our
rubble
drinking
trench.
water
You take
out of
rubble that won't decay. And you dig a trench
cold.
that drains the daylight. You put a piece of flexible perforated pipe in the bottom of it, and you fill that with gravel and chunks of brick and whatever to the top of it, tamping it down so you've got a foundation that the water will go through, that the water won't freeze in, because foundations break up if water gets under them and then freezes, because frozen water is bigger than liquid water, so it expands and contracts the soil, and when it does, it's a very strong force that can break the strongest foundation of a building. So you want to eliminate the water under the building so that the building will stay put. And once you do that, then you can put down stone or brick or chunks of concrete to get above the ground, where you can start sculpting your top.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then like
I want to put in a bucket.
Thank you.
It's communal mud.
setting up for
It's
like
cool.
the wiring, so you can have like on grid stuff.
So
like
the lovely
power.
thing about
They say a
cob,
storm is coming.
it being a
Seems
sculpting
like it.
thing like this, is I can make a wall out of this stuff.
Right.
Okay, and then I can come back and say, well, I want an outlet right here, but my wire's over there. You take a machete and you chop a groove in the wall about yay deep, and you shove your piece of raspberry old electric line into that, and then you have the inspector come and see.
Now
Yeah.
that muddy water.
You
Wow,
have to, like,
you just
buy
making
little
your
pencil
hands
clasps
muddy.
that hold it to things. You just
Yeah,
shove
I
it in that
know.
crack.
You go more.
And then when the inspector has inspected it, you pick up all the stuff you hacked out of the wall, and you mix
some
it
more
with
cleaner,
water,
other people
and you
can
mush it
wash
back
it
in,
too.
and then you trowel over it and you plaster. Yeah. So then when you go to add another piece, you just take the machete and you just put another plug over there.
How do people feel, or how do most like states feel about the permitting and everything like that of it? If like just an entire house.
So it's very, very easy if you build it with posts holding up your roof. There's a couple of benefits to that. The first one being that your code guy says, well, clearly the wood is holding that up, and the wood is strong. Mud weak, wood strong. That's how the brain processes this. Even though a 2-foot thick wall made out of mud, my friend Christina, who taught me how to do this, built this big hunting lodge in West Virginia, and the timber framer dropped a 6-ton oak beam from the crane on the wall and watched in a split second as it was dropping, watched his entire summer's wages disappear as it would crumble, and it bounced. Because these things are durable. When she built a little house in Pensacola, Florida in the early 2000s, the only thing left in that neighborhood after her big hurricane was her little house, because everything else got washed away. And the mud, the outside of the mud was washed away, and the big coastal oak that fell on it kind of bounced. It crushed the roof a little bit, but it was fine. And there weren't any other houses there after this.
Could these be door handles?
How thick do you make the walls?
Anywhere between, so like if I'm making a little goat shed, I can actually set up a big piece of goat fence and sculpt it around that armature and make it like yay thick, okay? And I can even wire bottles to it and then make stained glass as I'm going up. It's a lot of fun to do something like that. Or I can, anywhere from there to 2 feet thick. I mean, if you get the old style cob that didn't have as much fiber in it, wasn't as scientific, it was just whatever they could dig up, those are 3-4 foot thick sometimes out in the old world.
So if
That
you
is
have
a
the post-
lot of
That's a
material.
lot of material, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's why I was asking, because I'm like, this would make like a wall this big.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
so here's the other thing that happens with that is that if I have a flat piece of paper and I try to stand that up, is it going to stand up? No. And I might, but if I curve it, it will stand up. In fact, if I can tape it in a cylinder, I can put a phone book on top of it. That's how strong that piece of paper is with the forces aligned properly. And a wall that is curved with a much smaller amount of material can be even stronger than a flat wall.
Sure.
So if I build a curved wall,
Yeah.
first of all, your body appreciates it more. The sensuality of curves is a real thing, and then it's also stronger with less material.
So with the post, let's say like you're gonna do the post and like permanent, can you use like huge like a tree? Like a
Absolutely,
poster tree?
absolutely. You overbuild it, and your code person, whose job it is to make sure nothing gets built that they don't feel is safe,
Right.
they look at those posts and they say, "Oh, that's not going." They don't actually have to even look at the math to say that's not going anywhere. And a lot of times you can just get away with it.
Are there out there that are on? I've been working on it. Like true
No,
You
but
mean ones that aren't more than 500 years old, where they didn't protect them?
60 mile per hour
They're
winds
still.
too.
60 coming through here though? I checked on my phone.
I don't know. That's what
Yes,
Andrew
yes.
said. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get a little rain, but I don't think we're gonna get what the warning was. I think that's for.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
North Carolina's a good place for it.
Ask
The further north you get, the more insulation you need.
maybe we should.
Hillsborough, Thomasville, Graham. F1 doesn't on there, but look at the radar. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
How close is it on the radar? I think we should probably
I think we should
put this on hold, clean up, and we can go under a place and continue, because like otherwise it's gonna
Well, I wanna
be
get the-
raining and stuff,
Super
and we're
dry,
gonna be
super wet.
scrambling.
We're gonna cut you off for a minute, just because
Alright.
it looks like a bad storm might come through. We want to set you back up maybe under a thing, but if a couple people can help me just kind of lock the treehouse down, put a couple of studs up and cross pieces.
Yeah.
And I got most of my stuff up already, but
I'm gonna go close up the van.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's close up, guys.
Hide and seek.
Hey, Aiden, so there's a storm rolling in, so everyone's gonna work together to get everything, yeah.
we'll get back tomorrow.